The only way you're getting out of that situation is if that captor releases you.
Thought it was a feast of friends, but Lord, they proved me wrong. What seemed to be my rescue turned out to be a trap. Suddenly I was alone inside that demon's house. He climbed the walls with blood and mother glowing through his side. And I couldn't escape, and every move I made was wrong. Tonight a demon came into my head. Ah!
What's the matter? Nothing happened. Just leave.
You're teaching your children, obviously children are sponges and they soak in everything they see and hear, and you're teaching your children what a healthy and or unhealthy relationship looks like. And also with that, if you're stuck in a relationship with an abuser and you have a child in common, it makes it that much more hard to try to leave that relationship, because there's that bond of the child in common. You feel like you should stay together for the sake of the child, or there's been a threat that if you leave with the child, I'll do something.
Stockholm Syndrome formally got its name in 1973 in Stockholm, Sweden, after 4 hostages were taken in a bank robbery. After the release of the hostages, the victims began to defend their captors and refused to testify against them in court. This was due to the emotional bond created between their captors. The most famous case of Stockholm Syndrome occurred a year later, when a newspaper tycoon's granddaughter, Patty Hearst, was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, who aimed to garner a hefty ransom. Hearst recorded an audio tape that would soon be heard around the world, announcing she had become a part of the SLA and would later go on to rob a bank with them. In 2 different cases, J.C. Dugard and Natasha Kampusch were both held captive for years. After their release, both would go on to show signs of sympathy for their captors. Victims of Stockholm Syndrome show the same sympathy to their abductors as victims of domestic abuse show to their abusers.
Well, it becomes a dependency, first of all, right? So when you are, in a situation where you have a captor, the only way you're getting out of that situation is if that captor releases you. That's what you're thinking, right? So the power's all gone. You have no power, they have all the power. So there's a dependency that happens. That's the same thing that happens in abusive relationships. The dependency comes first, right? So you have to make that person feel that they have no power without you. So then once that happens, when they allow you to do anything, they allow you to leave. The captor allows the victim to leave. They love that captor. Look it, they really cared about me. They were just trying to prove a point. They were just trying to get their message out there. They're misunderstood.
I still really, really felt like I was in love with her, but honestly, I was afraid because I didn't know what would happen. I had pretty much decided that this was what I was gonna do with my life. I was gonna be with her and end up with her, and I would do everything I could to do that. So I honestly didn't know what would happen if I wasn't with her. Like I said, we had a house, we had a dog, we had a mortgage payment. Freaking 26 years old, I figured my life was set. But mostly I was afraid of what would happen if I wasn't with her. Like, oh, I would be alone forever, I would never be able to find anybody else.
talk about what's called the cycle of violence. And I think it says a lot as to why people stay in these sort of relationships. And the cycle of violence is basically there's a stage in your relationship where it's considered the honeymoon stage, where everything's nice, everything's good, and then as things progress in the relationship, there's some tenseness, or there's an argument or something like that where emotions are high. From there, it moves into the physical abuse or the mental abuse, where either party, the guy or the girl, can be physically abused or mentally abused by their partner, and that kind of cycle continues. And I think people stay in the relationship because eventually they come out of that physical harm and back into the honeymoon stage, where the people that they initially fell in love with are nice to them, and they are engaging, and they give them presents, and they give them attention, and so they think everything's okay until it slowly builds back into that tenseness in the relationship, and then all of a sudden you're back into another physical altercation with your loved one.
Now, I can see all the red flags, which sailed past me at the time in pursuit of a man who told me he loved me and would take care of me. We met because I worked with his fiancée at the time. She had invited me over a few times to hang out after a shift. He was much older and very handsome. When I noticed the way he was looking at me, I was more than flattered. Within a month, my coworker was out, and I was in. In the beginning, it was all compliments and gifts and passion. He told me I should quit my job and that he could take care of us on his own. I thought he was trying to be chivalrous and obliged. I didn't know he just wanted me all to himself.
A lot of times, abusers are charismatic, they're manipulative. So some of the tactics that they use are, first of all, isolation, taking the victim away from any support systems that they have. So if you take them away from that and they don't think that there's an alternative, and it's a way for the abuser to feed all the information, be the only information giver to the victim. So if the victim is hearing things like, you're no good, you have no value, you'll never make it without me, all those kinds of things, there's no one else there to tell them contrary, that's not true, that this person has no power over you. So isolation is one of the tactics that's often used. Take them away from loved ones or people who care about them.
It started with giving me the cold shoulder, the silent treatment. I remember thinking how I must have done something wrong, even though the rational part of me knew that it wasn't my fault he was in a bad mood. The arguments picked up in severity quickly from there. He would accuse me of cheating on him with friends he had over, obsessively going through my phone and asking me about my male friends.
You think everything is going well in your relationship, and all of a sudden you flip back into an intense time in your relationship, and then back into the physical harm and the abuse. And so a lot of the abusers keep their abused party in the relationship by idle threats, or even the abused person has the perceived threat that if I don't act a certain way or do a certain thing, something will happen to me.
The first time he laid his hands on me, we were watching a movie, and I had something in the oven. All of a sudden, we could smell burning plastic. I ran to the oven and discovered Kyle had a knife set stored in the bottom of it that I had destroyed. And I knew it was going to be bad. He ran across the living room to the kitchen where I stood and struck me in the face with the back of his hand. It was hard enough to make me stumble backwards a few steps. I stood there in shock, and we stared at each other. He almost looked shocked himself. I cried, and he apologized. And I stayed.
If you're talking about romantic relationships, I would say a lot of times a victim stays in an abusive relationship because, first of all, there's a lot of fear. And fear could be fear of losing someone they love, they perceive to love, or fear of losing someone they perceive loves them, fear of not having anyone else to go to, fear that they'll never find another love, that this may be it, this is maybe all that they deserve. A lot of times it's about loss of financial stability, maybe fear of losing their children or family, or their stability. It sounds ironic to say that because there's such an instability in a domestic violence relationship or an abusive relationship, but that instability therefore becomes their stability.
I didn't have an identity anymore. I was consumed in making sure that he was okay, and it became a method of survival. I didn't need to hide the bruises because I didn't leave the house without him, and even then, rarely. The last time he abused me, I thought I would die. He came home to find me smoking a cigarette, one of his, and became enraged immediately. He was allowed to smoke, and I wasn't. 2 steps across the living room and 1 blow across the face, I flew up the stairs to the bedroom. I tried to hold the door shut, but he forced his way in. Knees on the floor, begging him to stop, he put his hands around my throat and shook me. I yelled for help, but it wasn't loud enough. No one came. And then, things went dark. I woke up to him crying in the corner of the room. I picked myself up and walked out into the house and never went back. Months later, his ex-fiancée contacted me. She told me that I had probably saved her life by stealing her boyfriend. He had beaten her for years, and she had been too angry with both of us to warn me. I knew he would do the same to you, she said. But even if she had warned me, I would have ignored her. Chalked it all up to jealousy in the name of the man that I loved and thought that I knew.